Hey again, and welcome yet another time to my channel and this little video. I think this is super interesting actually, because now we reach a point where we actually can fetch data before we render stuff in React in a very easy way, so to say. This is about React Router version 6.4 and the loaders in React Router. So I'm very excited about this one. Stick around and check it out because you will learn a lot of cool stuff in this video. All right, we're going to start up by bootstrapping our application, and we're going to do that with Vite. So go inside of your terminal, inside a folder that you prefer, and we're going to type in something like npm create Vite at latest, and we're going to name our project, maybe router loader or something else. You decide, dash template and React -ts. And we choose React, Typescript, cd router-loader, npm install. Okay, hopefully it installed everything correctly for you. I open up my code editor and I'm going to strip out some stuff that we don't need. I want this to be as clean as possible to not distract you from anything else. So we're going to keep the main. We can delete the app. Yeah, I don't think we need that. Yeah, for now we delete the app and app component and the index CSS file. Delete those. And maybe assets. Yeah, we don't need the assets folder. Delete that one. But we are going to need a new folder that's called routes. And that's it for now. Yeah, and first, actually, before we do this, we can actually install React Router. So npm I react-router-dom. It's the DOM that I install now, not just React Router. It's React Router DOM. And there you have it. And we can check our package.json to see that we're on version 6.4.1 and we're on React 18.2. So that's good. So now we can continue on here to scaffold out our components. So inside our routes, I'm going to do this pretty fast also because I want to focus more on the React Router stuff. I have a lot of videos for you if you want to know how to create a folder structure and components in React. We're going to need an error.tsx. We're also going to need a Pokemon.tsx. And we're going to need one that's called root.tsx. So that's the components. And we scaffold out these ones for now. Const error equal an error function. And we return a div that just says error. And we export default error. Copy this one. Go inside Pokemon.tsx. Paste it in. Change error to Pokemon. Go inside the root. And change it to root, like that. Then we go inside main. We're already importing React and React DOM, that's fine. We're going to import our components. I mark it with components, like that. Import Pokemon. Import root. And import error. That's our components. We don't have the app anymore and we don't have the index. So remove that one. And for now, instead of the app, we can just show the root like that. We are going to use this later, of course, but for now, save this and make sure that you have saved all the other files. Go inside of the terminal, type in npm run dev. And the side is open up on this port here. Yeah, and of course it opened up in another window than the one that I intended to open it up in. So there we have it, root. So our application is working and we can continue on. So that's great. So go back to the code editor. The first thing I'm going to do here is to set up some routes before we actually fetch any data. So you have a couple of ways to create your routes in React Router. You can create them in an array with objects, or you can create it with JSX elements. I'm going to show you both of these ways here to do it. But first we have to import some stuff here from React Router. So we're going to import create browser router and create routes from elements. And we need a route and router provider. These are the 4 different things we need from React Router DOM. So we're going to create our routes, and I do that, as I said, first in an array with objects. So const router equal, then we call the create browser router that we imported. We give it an array as argument, and that array is going to have our routes in different objects. So one route is one object, so to say. So in the first object, we have the path. The path is going to be the root, so we have a /. The element is going to be the root. That's the component that we created. We have an error element that is going to be shown if we go to a route that doesn't exist. So that's the root route, so to say. Then we're going to have one more route. So I copy this, paste it in. And the path is going to be Pokemon /: and name. And when I use a colon here, that means that this is a URL param. So we can grab that value with name. You can name it to whatever you want. I named it name in this case because I want to send along the name for the Pokemon. So this is how you specify URL params that you can access in your code. The element is going to be Pokemon for this one. And error element can also be the error. So now we have 2 separate routes. I'm also going to show you later how you can nest these routes. But for now, this is enough. Then we create our router instead of root down here. And actually, I can bump up the font size for you here so you see it a little bit better. So instead of root here, we have the router provider that we imported from React Router DOM. And we have a router prop. And we give it the router that we created. Like that. Save this, go back to the code. And hopefully we have a working router. So this is the root, but then we have the Pokemon. You can see now it displays the error because I didn't specify the other path here with a route param. So yeah, we can take that one. And then you can see that when you specify the name here, it goes to that component. But if you specify something else here, it's going to show the error component instead. So that's great. We know that that is working. All right, so that's the routes. Then I can show you if you want to nest this route, because I want to actually, on the root, I want to fetch the different Pokemons and have them as kind of a header menu. And then I want to display the Pokemon below that one, so you always have access to the menu. And so the root is more going to be like a layout, maybe you can call it, where you always have access to that header with the different Pokemons. So if you want to nest this one inside instead, you have a children property here on the object that takes in an array with different objects also. So you can nest this inside of here. So instead of this empty object, we can paste in this one we had here, like that. And we remove this one. And this will make the root as as I said, kind of a layout. So it will nest this children inside of that one. We doesn't specify now where to render this child element, so to say. So inside our root, we're going to import some stuff there. We're going to import something that's called an outlet from React Router DOM. And inside of this div here, we use the outlet like that. Do some auto formatting. So with the outlet, you can specify exactly where you want to place the child element. So now you can see that the Pokemon is here, but actually, why isn't the root showing? Yeah, that's of course because I'm not specifying the root here. So I can type it out there. So you can see everything above is specified here, everything in the root, and then you have the outlet. That's actually the child page. So this is the structure we're going to have on this one. Go back to the main. This is the way how you create routes if you specify it inside of an array, but you can also specify it as JSX elements, and I'm going to show you that also now. Const JSX router equals create browser router, just exactly the same as we did here, but instead of giving it an array, we're going to call this one here, create routes from element. Create routes from elements, and that one in turn takes in the JSX elements that we want to use. So when we do it this way, we need to specify a route with a route element, and the element prop is going to be the root, like that. The path is going to be /. The error element is going to be the error. So these props are exactly the same as we used here in the object. And now when we want to nest this one in, we just nest it just as regular in JSX inside of this element. We wrap it with that one. Route element equals Pokemon. We have the path. That's going to be Pokemon / name. And now, as we have the error element here in the parent, we don't need it in this one. We can self-close it, like so. And I actually think this is a better way. I just prefer this way better. This is exactly the same as this one here. So instead of sending in the router, we send in the JSX router here. Didn't I name it like that? Yeah, of course, capital R. And I'm going to comment this one out. So this does exactly the same thing, and we can check that out here. You can see that it works exactly the same. And if we specify something else here, the error component is shown. So it's working, and I want to stick with this way. I think this is more expressive and more readable, but that's highly preferable. If you don't like it, it's nothing wrong, either of them, so you can use whatever you want. All right, so that's our router setup, and then we're going to do some stuff in the root. We want to fetch the data from the Pokemon API. So go inside the root.tsx, and when we have fetched the data, we also want to link the data to the different Pokemons. So we need a link from React Router DOM, and we need something that's called use loaded data, and that is a hook that you use inside of your component to access the data that you fetch with the loader. And I'm also using Typescript now, so I want to actually type this data that we get from the API. So I export an interface, Pokemon type. And I'm not going to use all the stuff that you have there, because if you check out the API, you have a lot of data that you receive. I'm going to use the name, so that's a string. Then I'm going to need a URL, that's also a string. And then we have the sprites. I'm just using the small images here, and that's from sprites. And we have something that's called front_default as a string. So this is just from the API. This is nothing that I came up with. It's from the API. These are the different properties that we get back in the JSON data. So that's for one specific Pokemon. But we're going to grab more than one here. So we have interface Pokemons. You can also name it Pokemon's type if you want to be more explicit. And we have a property called Pokemons. And we have the results. And the results is going to be of the type Pokemon type, and it's going to be an array. So that's the type that we created up here. And the results is simply going to be an array of a lot of Pokemons that has this type. So that's the types that we need. All right, so we're pretty good to go here, and now we can create our loader function. And this is new with React Router 6.4, because before you couldn't actually fetch some data before you show the page. And that's pretty cool here, because now we access and fetch the data before we even show the page. So that's great. We're going to have the data when we mount the component already ready for us. So we export a function that I call root loader. You can call it whatever you want, but they call it loader inside of the documentation. So I think it's a good way to go with that. It's going to be an async function because we're fetching data. And the return type on this one is going to be a promise of Pokemons. Like that. And I'm using an arrow function. You don't need to do that if you don't want. And actually, I named it Pokemon's type. Like that. And now it complains because we're not returning anything that resembles that. Okay, so we're good to go. Const results. We await and fetch from the Pokemon's API https://pokeapi.co/API/v2 version 2 and Pokemon. I'm not going to go into detail on this one. You can read up on the API if you want to know exactly what resources you have to fetch data from. Then we check if not results.ok. Then we throw new error. Something went wrong. Right. And we have the const Pokemons. If everything is okay, we're going to await the results .json and convert it to JSON. And then we're also going to return our Pokemons. Like that. So the return type that we specified here is exactly what we get back here. We have a property called Pokemons, and inside of that one, we have the results with each Pokemon in an array. Right, so we have the loader, but how do we use this loader? Well, we have to go back to the main. And first of all, we have to import this loader. So from our root, we can also import our root loader like that. And it's actually as simple as this here. Somewhere here on the root route. That's pretty strange to say for me. And it's a little bit funny also, probably, but who cares? Who cares? You have a prop that's called loader, and we give it the root loader. And this will actually fetch the data for us, hopefully. But I also want to go back to the root to see if we can display the data. So inside the root component itself here, we cannot make an implicit return anymore because we want to call a hook here. So we return it like this. And then we imported a hook up here that's called use loader data. So we call that hook const. We destructure out the Pokemons because the result is going to be this type here. So we destructure out that property. Use loader data. We call that one. But now it complains because this one, it doesn't exist there. It doesn't know that because if you check the use loader data, it's of type unknown. So it's not typed that good here, actually. I don't think this is hooked in fully to TypeScript. So we have to type it ourselves. So we cast it as Pokemons. Like that. Pokemon's type. And this will make sure that we have all these properties on this one, hopefully. So we can console log it out. Pokemons. Like that. Go back to our application. Go to the root. And you can see here, it's so sweet. I really love this one because we have the data here now. You can see the results here and stuff. And it fetches it before it actually mounts the component and render it to the DOM. So we already have the data, no need for a loading spinner or anything like that. And it's pretty awesome. So now we know that we have the data. So we can return something here. Instead of the div, we are not returning a div, we return a fragment. And then inside, I'm going to create a simple header here. Like that. And inside of the header, I'm going to map through the Pokemons.results. And we have a Pokemon. You can see we have all the types here now, and that's so sweet with TypeScript. It's very, very easy to use and see what properties you want to use. I want this name to be linked to the subpage for each Pokemon. So I use the link component. I'm going to set the style on this one inline here just to have some margin right of 20. Otherwise, they will kind of, just look like a blob of different names. We don't have any margin. So just some small styling. We need a key as we map through stuff. And from our Pokemon, we have our name. That's going to be unique. And we're going to route it to this one. I'm using backticks because I have a template literal here. We're going to map through Pokemon /, and then we have a $, curly brackets, and the Pokemon.name. Close the link, and then we display the Pokemon.name. So what I'm doing here is that I'm mapping through all the Pokemons, and I create a link for each Pokemon in the array, and I use the Pokemon name to wrap inside of the link, and I also link it to the route that's Pokemon /, and this is the dynamic stuff here, and that's also the URL param that we're going to grab on the specific Pokemon page later. Save it, go back, and you can see that we have all the Pokemons here. So when I click here, you can see that I'm routed to that page, and the name changed up here in the URL. So that's how we kind of know what data to grab on the Pokemon page, by this name here, because they are unique. And you can see that, yeah, it's not pretty good here now with the UX or anything, but this is not a lesson in styling or stuff like that. So I'm not going to show you how to style this. I added this 20 pixel margin to the right. So that's it for now. You have to be satisfied with that, so to say. Okay. So that's everything we need in the root page. So go inside of the Pokemon page. And just as before, we're going to need the use loaded data from React Router DOM. And we're also going to need the types for the loader function args. Like that. And we need the type for each Pokemon, and I specify them in the root now, and I exported this one here, so we actually can import it inside of this component. Import Pokemon type. And then we have our loader function, and in this case, it's going to be almost the same as this one. So I'm going to go back to the root, copy this one, and paste it in here. Of course, it would be better to have some generic function when we shouldn't repeat ourselves that much. But in this case, I think it's more explicit to show that you can have more than one loader function. So I'm going to just paste this in here and change some stuff. In this case, we want to have access to that URL param that's up here. So we want to fetch this one in the loader function before we can fetch anything from the API. So we have to do that here. And when this loader function gets called, it is also called with the params. So I just structure out the params. But now it complains because this one is not typed. And that's why I imported this type here that's provided with React Router DOM. So loader function args, and now it won't complain because now we have these types here. You can see that we have them nicely here, so that's great. And in this case, we're not going to return a Pokemon's type. We're going to return a Pokemon type. Very similar here with just the S is the different thing here. So maybe should have named them something else. I don't know. Hopefully you'll understand this. Anyway, and we're not going to grab from this resource anymore. We're going to add in a / and change this to backticks and make it a template literal. And we add in a $, curly brackets, and from the params, we have our name. And now you can see that it complains here, but that's fine because we're returning the wrong stuff here. This one is the same. Pokemons, we can name this Pokemon. And instead of returning this object here, we return a Pokemon like that. And I did something else here that's not correct. Yeah, I have the wrong backtick there. It was actually a front tick, or what do you say? I don't know. But this should be it now. And hopefully we have a Pokemon here. It says Annie. That's because this one is Annie now. But it will return it as this type. So you can see here, it's actually called root loader now. We can call it Pokemon loader. And instead of just returning this one here, we're gonna return something else. We're gonna have a fragment again. And actually we can fetch the data here first. Const or fetch, we have already fetched it, but we can use that data with a hook. Const Pokemon, use loaded data, and we cast it as Pokemon type. And that will make sure that we have it typed correctly here. Then we have an h2 tag. We have the Pokemon.name. And then we can also display the picture, the image, IMD src from the Pokemon.sprites.front_default. And this should be it. So just checking, so we have everything here. And we also need to use this loader, of course, otherwise we'll get an error. If we save this and go here, you can see that it says that it doesn't recognize this. And that's because we don't have the loader. So inside our main, here on the Pokemon, we also import the Pokemon loader. And just as we did with root, we add the loader as Pokemon loader. Save it. Go back to our application. And now you can see that it's working beautiful here. And I love this. One thing here, though, is that when we have this root as a layout, it will refetch the data for that one on every click here. And we don't have any caching or anything set up for this one. And that's also where you can use, for example, React Query or TanStack Query, as it's called now, to actually cache your data. And I know there is a good article about this that I read recently on this one, how you can combine these two together. Because I know that a lot of you think actually that, yeah, maybe we don't need a React Query now anymore. And I don't think that's true necessarily, because we don't have any caching or anything. This is just catching the data for us before we render the component. So I think those two will be very, very neat together if you use React Query together with these new features in React Router. And hopefully you learned something in this one too. I hope you learned a lot from my channel. And please make sure to support me by subscribing and spread the word about my channel. I really, really want this to grow more so I can spend more time creating stuff like this, because I love teach stuff like this. And hopefully I see you in another one.